Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Yevamot daf Kuf Yud Gimel. Again, I'm, unfortunately, as COVID continues its travels throughout the population, taking over for Dove for today, which is why I don't have a summary. Hopefully, I'll have one for tomorrow. So, where are we? We're up to Kuf Yud Bet Amud Bet at the Gemara. 7 lines up from the bottom of the page. And we learned in our Mishnah the variety of different situations when you have a marriage that involves somebody who is a cherish, who is deaf mute. This is somebody who is unable to hear, unable to talk, unable to communicate, except possibly through a very simplified kind of sign language, because they didn't have formal sign language back then. And so as a result, was viewed as lacking the intellectual capacity to engage in many transactions. And so as a result, they were viewed as, their marriages are viewed as only rabbinic, that the rabbis allowed them to get married, and we'll discuss that, I believe, at some point today. Their divorce is similarly only rabbinic, and therefore does not have the ability to exist in a biblical situation, and then because they are unable to speak, they are unable to engage in chalitza. So those were the key elements. Again, rabbinic marriage, rabbinic divorce, and unable to speak, so no chalitza. So those were the restrictions under which they operated. And of course, if something happened that caused them to be biblically connected to somebody else, so they might even have to divorce their current spouse due to that biblical alternative connection, that Zika relationship, as we saw in our Mishnah. So now we're going to ask a key question. So we're going to begin with understanding the difference between men and women in this regard. So Amarami Chama, so we begin again 7 lines up at the Gemara. Rabbi Chama says the following. He asks the following question: Ma'ishna cherish v'chereshes desakinu lahu rabbanan nisuin. I'm sorry. That why is it that when it comes to those who are deaf, whether it's male or female, what's the difference? Ma'ishna deshota. That what's the difference between a male or female person who has lost their ability, their sanity? So the rabbis did not institute for them the possibility of marriage. Tanya, because we have a brisa that highlights this difference. That when it comes to a minor male boy who marries somebody, or somebody who is who has lacked a capacity, a shota, and we defined, by the way, back in Chagiga, we defined a shota as somebody who either engaged in would go to sleep in the cemetery, who would go out at night, who would tear their clothing. So those were signs that somebody had lacked an understanding of the world, and so as a result would indicate go out alone at night, would all indicate some lack of competency to make wise decisions. So when it comes to a marriage done by such a person or by a minor, so and then that person dies, there is no Zika relationship. There's no yibum that applies. It's as if they weren't married in the first place, because their marriages have no effect. So, but cherish v'cheresh. So the Gemara now answers. So cherish v'chereshes the kaima takantan Rabbanan, when it came to the those who are deaf, so the rabbis realized the kaima takanta de Rabbanan, that if they made a takana to allow the marriage, it would withstand the test of time. But so therefore, takinu lahu Rabbanan nisun. So as a result, they instituted a rabbinic marriage. But shota v'shota, the la kaima takanta de Rabbanan. They, if you were to marry such a person, that you would, the marriage could not continue. They don't lack the ability to make wise decisions, and so as a result, that is not a good institution. And so as a result, de'ein adam and why not de'ein adam dar im nachash b'chafifa achas. You don't live with a snake inside a basket. Meaning, so you're not gonna be in a long-term relationship with somebody who can bite you at any moment, whether that's literally or metaphorically. So lo takinu rabbanan nisuin. So in that situation, the rabbis did not institute the concept of marriage. So that's question number one. Now the question is what's the difference between somebody who is deaf and a minor? So umayshna katan delo takinu rabbanan nisuin v'cheirish takinu le rabbanan nisuin. So why for a boy, a minor boy, did they not institute marriage? But for a cheirish, they did institute marriage. After all, lots of people live with children, and children are not like the snake in the basket. Well, the answer is cheirish de lo asi l'chali nesuin. For a deaf mute, they're never going to have a time at which they will be able to engage in marriage. So as a result, a biblical marriage. And so as a result, takinu rabbanan nisuin. So that's why the rabbis had them be able to marry. But a katan, a male child, the asi l'chal nisuin, who will eventually become marriageable, lo takinu rabbanan nisuin. They can wait. They don't need to marry so fast. B'harei katana. Well, what about a minor girl? A minor girl, we say, does have the idea of marriage. We say that they can marry, and even biblically, when the father does it, and yet even when they when there is no father, the rabbis instituted marriage for the little girl, so that the brother and sisters could marry her off. The brothers and mother could marry her up. That's what I meant to say. Brothers and mother could marry her up. So Hassam, the Gemara explains, in that situation where the father has passed away and the brothers and mother marry her off, shelo yinagu ba minhag hefker. We're worried that people are going to treat her in an immoral fashion, meaning that they're not going to, there's no one there to protect her. Umayshna katana dimana, umayshna chareshes delomamana. Well, 1 second. Why? All right, so you've allowed a minor female child to get married rabbinically, but there's a big difference between the minor, and it seems like the reason that we're allowing the marriage for a minor female child is similar to the reason that we're allowing the marriage for a female who is deaf, who is unable to speak, who is unable to communicate. So, because when it comes to the minor, she's able to reject the rabbinic marriage. She's able to do miyun and say, I don't want to be married to this guy, and walk away. And it's as if the marriage never happened. But a cherish doesn't have that ability. So why not? So the Gemara explains the imkain, and now we turn to Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. So min main minat below naspela, right? The point is that if in fact we said that she would have the right to reject, that the cherish would have the right to reject the marriage, well then who would marry her in the first place? No one. People wouldn't want to be in a situation, as Rashi says, top Rashi on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Hoil Villa Olamhi, since her ability, her cherish status is expected to continue forever. She would always be able to do miyun, to reject the marriage, because of her deafness. Aval kitana gvul yeshla. There's a limit to it. So v'savar mifaisen Allah. So the husband will think, listen, I'll at least be able to appease her from the time that I marry her until the time she becomes an adult. And then kol shasa ad sheyavor zman miyuna. I'll just make sure to treat her very well until she becomes an adult. And then I can treat her, less well. Well, I don't know whether that's necessarily the great thing. But the point is that kind of logic is a logic that we all have. Meaning that if we have to make a commitment where the person can literally walk away at any moment and is and has nothing tying them to the relationship other than the relationship, so that is not a stable institution. You can involve it, you can have that for a few years, but the point is that the stability of the marriage depends on both sides being committed. And so while we can allow miyun for a minor for the limited time until she becomes an adult, that doesn't apply to somebody who is deaf. Okay. Umayshna katana da achla betruma, umayshna chareshes delo achla betruma. So what's the difference between and I'm gonna explain this according to Rashi and Tosos, who understand that we're talking about truma that is only rabbinic here, not biblical truma. So what's the difference between a minor who is allowed to eat truma if a minor daughter of a Yisrael who marries a Kohen, she's allowed to eat rabbinic truma, and a deaf mute woman is not allowed to eat rabbinic truma? Ditnan, we have a Mishnah that says the following: Ha'id Rabbi Yochanan ben Gurdgana, that we say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Gurdgana testified al hacheresha shehesiya abia, concerning a deaf mute girl whose father married her off while she was a minor. She yotz of a get. She goes out of the marriage with a divorce. Val katana bas Yisrael. But when it comes to a minor that is a bas Yisrael, shenises l'kohen, who is married to a Kohen, she'ochelas betruma. She's allowed to eat rabbinic truma. So the point is that he didn't say that with respect to the first girl. The first girl who was deaf mute, she was not allowed to eat rabbinic truma. He didn't say anything about it. He just said that she needs a divorce, and not that she's allowed to eat truma. And so the second one is allowed to eat truma. Ve'ilu chereshes lo achla. And so the point is that we just said that the minor girl who's a regular girl who has her full faculties is allowed to eat truma, but the chereshes was not allowed. So the concern is that maybe a deaf mute Kohen, so the male will be deaf and he will feed his deaf mute wife. So as a result, so in second, the Gemara asks, so what's wrong with that? Let him do so. Katan ochel nevelusu. It's because somebody who is deaf and mute is treated as if they lack the mental capacity to make decisions. It's like a minor who is eating nevela, who's eating meat that's not kosher. And a minor who eats meat that's not kosher, we're not obligated to stop them. We're not allowed to feed them the non-kosher food. But a minor who's eating something that's not kosher, we don't have an obligation to stop them. So the Gemara explains, no, the reason that we're concerned about this situation is maybe he will end up feeding biblical truma to a competent woman. So here he thinks, because of course he grows up eating truma because he's a Kohen, his marriage to a woman who has her full faculties is a rabbinic marriage, meaning that it does not enable the wife to eat biblical truma. And if we begin to allow a cheresh to have to feed his spouse any kind of truma, he will end up, in the end, we will not realize that we end up with a cheresh feeding a spouse who is fully able to make decisions, truma deoraisa, when that is prohibited to her. So the cheresh b'kachas naming lechel b'truma derabanan. Well, 1 second. So let her eat rabbinic truma, and that's what we were talking about in our Mishnah. We were talking about rabbinic truma. So why not let her eat rabbinic truma? So gzeira dilma asila ocha b'truma deoraisa. You can't even let her eat rabbinic truma because maybe she'll come to eat truma deoraisa. And again, the issue is that whereas with the little girl, so one, the marriage will eventually be biblical, and two is that there's less of a concern that if we allow the feeding of her truma, that we're worried that somebody's going to feed an adult woman biblical truma. Because when you look at a gzeira, the thing that you look at is there a biblical violation that is possible as a result of making a mistake that the gzeira is designed to prevent. So if we have so when we say we're going to prevent the giving of rabbinic truma to the to the wife, what is the situation where if in fact you were to change one thing, it would turn into a biblical prohibition? Well, for example, if we were to change that rabbinic truma to biblical truma, well, then a pikeach husband would be violating the Torah by giving it to his wife, the cheresh. And on the other hand, when it comes to the minor girl, if we were to change one thing, meaning let's say that girl, that instead of feeding her rabbinic truma, you were to feed her biblical truma, well, the issue is that she's a minor girl. So it's not going to, the concern is not so great. There's only going to be a rabbinic violation. And so as a result, the issue is only if we were to feed an adult girl biblical truma, but if she was an adult girl, it would be a good marriage. And so as a result, because it would be a good marriage, she would be allowed to eat biblical truma. So therefore, we don't have the gzeira in that case. So that's the story. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to ask for a better understanding about the difference between the way we treat a minor girl and a woman who is deaf mute. So umayshna katana de isla ksuva, umayshna chereshes de leisla ksuva. When it comes to the marriage of a minor girl, we require the husband to give a ksuva, that to write a marriage contract that commits the man to pay certain fees, a certain amount of money to the wife if they get divorced. But no such requirement is made with respect to a deaf mute woman. De'im Cain, because if in fact we were to deny, if we were to say that that even a deaf mute were to require a ksuba, so mimaynei below nasvi, as we saw earlier, men are going to try to avoid marrying her because they don't know what they're going to get in that marriage. They don't know how capable she will be and whether she will be somebody that will be good to marry. So katana minalan to isla ksuba. Well, how do we know in the first place that a katana does have a ksuba? Ditnan, because we learned in a Mishnah, hamima enes v'hashniya v'ailanis. If the girl rejects the husband, if a minor girl rejects her husband, or if there's a secondary erva, meaning that, for example, somebody is married to their mother's brother's wife. So marries their mother's brother's wife after the brother passes away. So that's a relationship that is considered prohibited. but it's not prohibited in the Torah. But because we prohibit the father's brother's wife in the Torah, that's an erva, we're going to also prohibit the mother's brother's wife. So, and an islandess, or if somebody marries somebody who is never matures into a female adult and is therefore not able to have children, all of those categories, the entire marriage is undermined, and ein lahen ksuba. They don't have any right to a ksuba payment. So those three categories. Abal yotza beget uketana. However, any of those who go out with a get, and even the ketana who goes out with a get, yesh la ksuba. She does have a ksuba. So meaning abal yotza beget uketan, meaning if it's both, if she goes out with a divorce and she's a minor. So the one situation is that needs a caveat is the minor girl who rejects her husband. So if she rejects her husband, well then yes, she does go out without a ksuba. But if the husband rejects her and actually gives her a divorce, well then she does have ksuba rights. How do we know that the woman who is a deaf mute does not have the ksuba? If you have a deaf mute man or somebody who is a shota, crazy, so and they marry somebody who is competent, even if the deaf mute regains his hearing and speech, regains full faculties, and the insane person becomes sane, ein lahem alayim klum. The wives have no claim against their husbands because when they married them, there was no ksuba requirement. So ratzu l'kaiman. However, if they want to keep their wives, yesh lahem ksuba maneh. So then they have to create the ksuba that is worth at least a mana. So upikeach shenasa chereshes o shota. Now, what about the reverse case where we have a man who has his faculties, who's marrying a woman who's a chereshes or a shota? So afilu kasav lameya mana, he has the ability to write a ksuba for hundreds of mana. Ksubasa kayemes, and that ksuba would be valid because he wanted to throw away his finances. He has the right to do it. Well, the point is now that was the end of the brisa, but the point is time of deratza. The reason that he's required to fulfill his ksuba that he writes for her is because he wanted to. So if he writes a document that obligates him, he has to fulfill that obligation. Halo ratza. If he didn't want to, ainla, she would have no legal right to a ksuba, even by even by rabbinic decree. De'im kain, because if in fact the rabbis did give her a legal right to a ksuba, so mimane the lo nasvela. Again, we will deter her marriage, and the rabbis did not want to deter any wedding. And so, whereas when it comes to a normal marriage, the rabbis figure that the man really wants to marry the woman, and so as a result, they will institute a ksuba in order to ensure that she is protected from from a ridiculous divorce of the whims of the husband. But when it comes to a chereshes, where we're more concerned about her just being out and not being protected by a husband, so we want to try and encourage marriage, and so we won't provide that protection. It's not to say that the man can't provide that protection on his own, and indeed it would be a wonderful thing for him to do, but we're not going to require it because we're worried that the result will be that we'll be discouraging that kind of marriage. And so in order to provide extra incentive for marrying somebody who is a chereshes, so we'll not require any ksuba. Well, ihachi, if that's true, pikachas lecheresh, when a woman who has her faculties marries a cherish litaken laksuba. So why didn't the rabbis institute a ksuba for her? So De'im Kain Mimaine below Minasve, right? She also now may be deterred to marry a deaf mute man and not want to marry him. And aren't we worried about that? So this is so the Gemara answers a concept that is very frequently referenced throughout Shas. Yoser misha ish rotza lisa, isha rotza lihinasei. That a woman wants to be married more than a man wants to be married. And so as a result, the natural inclination that women want to be married more than men, so that is what is going to drive the fact that we're not going to require the ksuba when the deaf mute man marries the woman, because it's only a rabbinic marriage, and so as a result, we can treat it differently. And given the fact that she may want to marry him more than he wants to be marry somebody else, so we that is enough to encourage a woman to want to marry him, and so as a result, we don't have to institute a ksuba to protect her. So now the Gemara tells a story. So Hahu Cherish, there was once a deaf mute man, Dahava B'Shivusa de Rav Malkio, that Malkio, that in Rav Malkio's neighborhood there he was living. But Ansve Itza, so he married a woman. So this deaf mute man got married because of La Arba Me'azuze, and he wrote a humongous ksuva, 400 zuz. So Amarava, I'm sorry, and Rav Malkio helped him get married. But when he did so, on behalf of the deaf mute, Rav Malkio, who was watching over this guy, wrote a 400 zuz ksuva for him. And yet we had just said that no ksuva was required whatsoever. So why did he do that? So Amarava man chakim kirav Malkio. Who is so wise as Rav Malkio? And that was not meant ironically. The Gavar Rabbahu, because he's a great guy. Kasavar, what was he thinking? Ilu ratza shevcha l'shamsho. So from the man's perspective, it is what he is getting is amazing. Because if he wanted to hire somebody to help him with the household chores and he hired a slave, that would cost money. Milos of Ninanle, wouldn't he have to do a purchase for it? Well, Kol Shekain Hacha. Now he gets somebody who's going to be a wife for him and is going to help around the house. Tiikatarte, he has two benefits. He gets the benefits of marriage and he gets the benefit of somebody who is going to be a partner in the work in the home. So that's a more maybe liberal kind of read. Obviously, you could read this as he gets a slave that is both the slave, personal slave, and the marriage slave. I don't think that that's the intention, but in any event, I'll note that alternate read. But the bottom line is that we now have we see that in fact, again, even though there's no, just like when the man marries a chereshes, he's able to create a ksuva even though there's no requirement. Similarly, when a cheresh marries a keyak, there's also no requirement that there's also no requirement there, even though there's no requirement, he's allowed to do so. Okay, so now we're going to have two versions of a statement in the name of Shmuel, and they're going to be opposites of one another, and then we're going to explain each of them how it all works out. So Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Shmuel. So Rav Chia bar Ashi says that Shmuel said, "Eishes cherish ein chayavin aleha asham talui." That if somebody, not realizing that they were engaging in an illegal relationship, so they go into a home, they think that their home, they think that it's their home, but or they they think that it's their home, and it ends up being the home of a deaf mute, and they end up having marital relations. He has marital relations with the deaf mute, thinking that it was his wife because it was dark, and so as a result, he now the question is, if in fact it was a biblical marriage, so then you would be chayiv a chatas, a sin offering. An asham taloi is a sin offering, a special sin offering that is offered when you're not sure whether you violated a biblical prohibition. And so what Rav Chia bar Ashi is saying in the name of Shmuel, what Shmuel is saying is that in this situation, because it's only a rabbinic marriage, we are not going to require this asham taloi. There's no suffix here. There's no uncertainty associated with it. So lema misayeh, should we say that the following Mishnah that comes from Trumos that it actually supports Shmuel, because Chamisha lo Yisramu, because we're told that 5 different kinds of people, they're separating of Truma. They should not separate Truma. V'im taromu, and if they do, well then ein Truma san Truma. They didn't even do anything from a legal perspective. So it's clear that these 5 categories don't have legal capacity. The Elohim, Cherish, Shota, V'katan, a Cherish, a Shota, and a minor. But Torim es Sheinu Shalo, and somebody who takes Truma from something that doesn't belong to him, right? That person also has no legal capacity. But Oved Kochavim Shetarim Shal Yisrael, and a non-Jew who takes Truma from a Jew. But Afilu B'Rishus Yisrael, even with the Jews' consent. In all those cases, ain't Truma so Truma. Those Truma is not a Truma. So what did we see? We see that a deaf mute has no ability to take Truma. And so doesn't that show that he has no ability to engage in marriage either? So who da'amar karabi Elazar? No, you could even say that the Mishnah that we does not support Shmuel, because you could even say that this Mishnah that is like Rebbe Elazar, who says the Tanya, Rebbe Elazar, that maybe Shmuel disagrees with this Mishnah, and that Shmuel actually agrees with Rebbe Elazar. That what does Rebbe Elazar say? The Tanya Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Mishum Rebbe Elazar. Rabbi Yitzchak said in the name of Rebbe Elazar, Trumas Cherish Lo Teitze Lechulin B'nei Shehu Safek. That if a Cherish does take Truma, so again, in the Mishnah that we cited it from the beginning of Trumos, a Cherish who takes Truma, it's nothing. It's as if he didn't do anything. But now in this statement, we say Trumas Cherish, a Truma that a Cherish takes, Lo Teitze Lechulin, is not considered unconsecrated, meaning that there is Mipnei Shehu Safek, there is some uncertainty about it. So maybe Shmuel says that there's uncertainty about the nature of a cherish. So in second, if in fact there's uncertainty about the nature of the cherish, well, Isfirik Rebbe Elazar, if in fact he holds like the Rebbe Elazar that maybe a cherish has the ability to engage in legal in actions that have legal effect, well then Asham Talui Nami L'chayev. Why doesn't Shmuel say that he's obligated with an Asham Talui? So Be'inan Chaticha Mishtei Chatichos, because Shmuel says that an Asham Talui does not get obligated in the case that I just told you. That in the case where he goes into the wrong house and thinks that it's the right house, and there's only one woman in the house, and he had marital relations with her, and we're unsure of her status, well, that is a situation where there's only one item of uncertainty, and as a result, we're not going to have an Asham Tali. That the Asham Tali requires 2 pieces. That in the classic situation, we have 2 pieces of meat. One is non-kosher chalev, and one is kosher shuman, and one is kosher fat. And so, and he ate one of them, but he's not sure which one. So, in that situation, we're going to require him to first offer an Asham Talui, and if he eventually discovers which one it is, so then we'll require him to offer a sin offering. So it shows that it's worse to do a sin where you're unsure if you sin. It's because you actually have to violate. You offer 2 offerings. It's better to be, again, these are all accidental sins. That's why you're chayav achatas. If you did it intentionally, you wouldn't be chayav achatas. But it's better to unintentionally sin with something you know about than with something you don't. But in any event, the point is that here there's only one woman. Where would Shmuel, if in this instance, say that you would have an asham talui, if in fact the two families lived in a two-family house, and it was the same house, and the guy goes into one room and he has marital relations, and he doesn't realize which room he went into, and so as a result, he's just not sure. Did he go into the right room or did he go into the wrong room? And so in that situation, that would be where he would be chayav an asham toli. And so maybe that's so as a result, even though the simplest way to understand Shmuel is to say that it's just totally non-biblical at all, and we don't even have any uncertainty. The other possibility is we could say that there is an uncertainty here, but he requires that you need that in order for the uncertainty to trigger an asham talui sacrifice, you need to have two items that are one that's permitted and one that's prohibited next to each other. And those two things, you have to do one of them, and you're not sure which one you did. So, well, 1 second. You're saying that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Lazar, and you're saying that Shmuel holds that you need two pieces. But Rabbi Lazar, does he hold that you need two pieces? Vatanya, Rabbi Lazar Omer, koi chayavin al chelbo asham talui. That if you eat a koi was a type of animal where we're not sure whether it's a behema, a domesticated animal, or a chaya, a wild animal. And a behema, the chaleb, the fat of that of the domesticated animal, is prohibited. But if it's a chaya, if it's the wild animal, the chaleb is permitted. So as a result, we're not sure. And yet, even though it's one piece of meat, and that we have an uncertainty about, Rabbi Lazar says you do have to offer an asham talui. So wouldn't Shmuel, who holds like Rabbi Lazar with respect to the question of who were arguing, might hold like Rabbi Lazar with respect to a deaf mute taking truma and whether his actions have legal effect? Wouldn't he also say that all you need is one piece to be chayav an asham talui? No, Shmuel Savak Rabbi Lazar b'chada, upalag alei b'chada. He could agree with Rabbi Lazar in one case, and he could disagree with him in another case. Okay, the ikad the amri, or alternatively, we could say something completely different. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Shmuel. That what did Shmuel actually say? Eishes cherish chayavin aleha asham talui. That in fact he is obligated in asham talui if you have marital relations with the wife, because we're uncertain whether maybe it's a biblically valid marriage. So Meisvei. So they asked, 1 second, what about that Mishnah in Trumos that said 5 different people, Chamisha lo Yisromu, 5 people can't take Truma, and their Truma, if they take it, is totally useless? Again, Savrala to Rabbi Elazar. He actually would say, like Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar was the one who said that if a cherish takes Truma, we actually do have an uncertainty about whether or not that Truma is Truma. Okay, so now we've given Shmuel's take on this issue. So by Rav Ashi. So now Rav Ashi asks, my time with the Rebbe Lazar. We quoted Rebbe Lazar that said that there was an uncertainty about the nature of a cherish, that maybe his truma that he takes is a valid truma. So the question is, is the uncertainty, there are 2 possible ways to understand this uncertainty. Uncertainty number one is we know that a cherish doesn't have full legal capacity, but mihu misapkale idaitat silusa. But does he have sufficient clear knowledge about whether about what he does, or does he not? Meaning, we know that a cherish has this amount of knowledge. What we're unsure about is whether this amount of knowledge is enough. And so that's our uncertainty. Or, Odilma, Pshitale the daita kalishta. Again, we're sure that he doesn't have the right top number, but the lav daita tsalusa, and we're sure that at least at certain times he doesn't have full mental capacity. That's the sort of the base level. That the issue is that when it comes to a deaf mute person, so maybe his baseline might be here, which is clearly incompetent, but maybe every now and then he's up here and he has moments of clarity. So is the uncertainty that we have whether his fixed level is sufficient, or is the uncertainty whether the man goes up and down and has moments of clarity and moments of lack of clarity? So that's the question. Which is the uncertainty that's driving? Well, Lamai Nafkamina, the Gemara asks, what does it matter? Who cares which kind of uncertainty it is? There's an uncertainty, and that's fine. So Lahotzi Ishtu Beget. So the reason that the uncertainty is important is because it tells us about how again, and this is all according to Rebbe Lazar. We don't actually paskin like Rebbe Lazar, but this is all according, and not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that a cherish can marry and a cherish can get divorced. But when it comes to Rebbe Lazar's attitude, lahotzi ishto beget, when it comes to divorce, if you say that it's just fixed right here and we just aren't sure whether it's sufficient or not, well then, whatever he did when he married her, he's doing the same thing when he divorced her. So b'kedushin kach, b'kedushin kach gerushin. Whatever his level was at the time that he married her, that's the level when he divorces her. So he's got the same power. But the amra itim chalim v'itim shota, that if you say that sometimes he's fully capable and sometimes he's not, well then kedushi matzi mekadesh, gerushe lo matzi megarish. Maybe when he did kedushin, he was up here, and maybe right now when he's trying to do gerushin, he's down here. And so as a result, maybe we shouldn't allow him to divorce if the uncertainty is about a fluctuation. And so the Gemara answers, so what is in fact Rebbe Lazar's reasoning and teku? We're not sure. And so as a result, we're unsure. And so we can't answer it. But the good news is that is not, my understanding is that not the way that we paskin this. And so as a result, we would allow the person who is deaf mute to both marry and divorce. All right, so now the next piece that we mentioned in our Mishnah was, what if she becomes insane? And we said that the man is not allowed to divorce her. So Rabbi Yitzchak, and again, the different kinds of insanity that we learned in Masechet Chagiga, Daf Gimel Bet, was going out alone at night, sleeping in a graveyard, tearing one's clothing. So all right, so Rabbi Yitzchak, Davar Torah Shota Miskareshes. Really, from the biblical perspective, she can be divorced because midi dehava apakachas bal karcha, just like a totally competent woman can be divorced against her will. Now again, Takanas of Rabbeinu Gershom says we don't allow that, but in any event, the point is that she can be divorced against her will. So umatam amruenim gereshes. So what's the reason the rabbis say she's not divorced? Shelo yinagu ba minhag hefker, so that people don't treat her in an immoral fashion, because we're worried that she will be available, that she has no capacity to take care of herself, so people will take advantage of her. Well, hechidami, what's the case? If you say that she's able to guard her divorce, and she's able to watch over herself, and although she's still considered somebody who's a shota, are people going to treat her immorally? No, she has the ability to watch over herself. And yet, if you say that she doesn't have the ability to watch over the divorce, meaning she's given a divorce decree and she's not able to watch that, and she's not able to watch over herself, Dvar Torah Shota Miskareshes, would we allow her to even get divorced from the Torah? The answer is no, we would not, because the Ha'amar Devei Rabbi Yanai, the people in Rabbi Yanai's academy, they said, the yeshiva Rabbi Yanai, they said, V'nasan biyada, in order to do a divorce, the pasuk says that the divorce has to be given into her hand. Mi sheyesh la yad l'garish atzma. She must have sufficient mental acuity to accept the divorce, to understand that she's being divorced. Yatzazo, this would exclude a person who has the level of insanity that she can't watch the divorce, she can't accept the divorce, and she can't watch over herself. She doesn't have that hand to be able to accept the divorce. V'tana debei Rabbi Yishmael, and the people in Rabbi Yishmael's taught, right? Not only you don't have to base it solely on B'nasan Biyada, you could also base it on the language in the Torah of Shilcha Mebeso. It says in those same psukim that you need to have, this is from Dvarim Kav Dalid Pasuk Aleph, that you need to, I think Pasuk Gimel, excuse me, that you need to have the ability to have her be sent from his house. And in here, that means that you send her away and she doesn't come back. Yatzazo, she doesn't understand that she's being divorced. So like, God forbid, to make a terrible comparison, like a dog that you try to send away, the dog comes back. She doesn't realize that, she doesn't know what's happening. Exactly. She doesn't know what's happening. So lo tzricha, that's not what we're not talking about either of those cases. We're not talking about the case where she has the ability to watch herself and accept the get, and we're not talking about the case where she doesn't have the ability to watch herself and she doesn't have the ability to accept the get. We're talking about a case, the Yodas Lishmor Gita, she has the ability to watch the divorce, to watch it over the document, the Aina Yodas Lishmor Atzma, but she doesn't know how to watch herself. And I think that's a mental state that I think we have familiarity with, in the sense that often people who have mental illness have the ability to watch over a thing and watch their possessions in a way that they don't have the ability to protect themselves. So in that situation, Dvar Torah Shotam in Skaresha. So again, in that situation where she is unable to understand what's going on, she tears her clothing, she sleeps in graveyards, she goes out alone at night, whatever it is that she's doing that doesn't make any sense, that shows a lack of understanding of the world. So yet she's still able to be divorced because she has the hayodas lishmor gita, because she has the ability to watch over her get, and she understands that she can't just stay at the house. But we're going to say, the rabbi's going to say, no, you can't divorce her, because we don't want people to treat her immorally. So Amar Abaye Daikanami. Actually, if you look carefully at the wording of our Mishnah, you can see that this is in fact true. The Katani Gabitida, because when our Mishnah talked about divorcing her, Nishtates lo yotzi, what did we say? We said that if she became insane, he's not allowed to divorce her. The Gabitide, but when it came to him, we said lo yotzi olamit, he can never divorce her. So Maishna Hacha. What's the difference between him when he becomes insane that we reference never, and over there when it came to her we didn't say the word never? When it comes to him, if he lacks the ability, if he lacks the sanity, well then it's never valid, and so as a result, therefore she can never leave him. But on the other hand, when it came to the rabbinic, to her, where it's only rabbinic, so therefore they don't say the word never. Okay, last little bit, and then we'll be done. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, they asked the following question. So 1 second, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said the following. Let's back up, and we actually have to get the comment that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was questioning. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was asking a question in our Mishnah. The Tanna Kama had said the following 3 rules. Rule number 1, if a woman becomes a deaf mute, the husband can divorce her or decide to keep her. If she becomes insane, he's not allowed to divorce her. And if he became a deaf mute or insane, well, then he can never divorce her. So we see that there's a difference between her becoming a deaf mute and him becoming a deaf mute. And so Rabbi Yochanan asked, what's the difference? Why is there that difference? So now the question is, what was the frame of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's question? Ibailahu, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, ish pshitale, was it clear to him? What was the basis of the question? Was it clear to him that a man who becomes a deaf mute cannot divorce his wife? The Isha coming by like, and he was asking, why is it that we're allowed to divorce a woman? I understand that the man can't divorce, he lacks capacity. But how could we allow the divorce of the woman? She lacks capacity. Or Odilma Isha Pshitale, that it was obvious to him that the woman could be divorced. After all, you don't need her capacity. The ish coming by like, and he was asking, I don't understand why, when the man becomes a cherish, do we not allow him to divorce? So tashma. So which of it is it? So let's take a look. Midika Amrle, one from the fact that what was the answer that the rabbis gave to him? They said, Eino doma ha'ish hamigarish leisha hamiskareshes, that the man who divorces is not comparable to the woman being divorced. Sha'isha yotza lirtzona v'shalo lirtzona, because a woman can be divorced whether with her will or against her will. Va'ish eino motzi elo lirtzona. It's not comparable. A man requires consent, his own knowledge. So Shema Mina ish kami by. So it's clear that he was asking, why was it that the man cannot affect a divorce? And the answer was because the divorce requires his knowledge, his intelligence. Well, one second. Adarabba. 1 second. You could say the exact opposite. Midika amrule, because what do they then say? Af zo kiyotzi zo. But that this case of the minor is like her. So Shema Mina Isha kami ba'ilei. So that shows that we're actually asking about the woman. So in order to now understand what we're asking about, so Ella Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri l'divrei kamru lahu. So actually, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri disagreed with the position of the Tanakama, and he was asking, lididi, according to me, ki heki deish lo matzi megarish. I believe neither of them can get divorced. The man can't get divorced, and the woman can't get divorced. Meaning, if the man becomes a cherish, he can't divorce. That's what our Mishnah says. But even if the woman becomes a cherish, she should not be able to get divorced. Isha nami lo migarsha. She also should not be able to get divorced because the marriage has changed. There is now a woman. The woman is not capable of making of capacity, lacks legal capacity, so she should not be able to get divorced. But so that makes all sense because I'm treating the man and the woman equally. But according to you, maishna isha umaishna ish, why are you treating the man and woman differently? Put differently, you say that a deaf mute woman can be divorced, but why is a deaf mute man? Why can't he divorce? Meaning, you should end up saying that if you're saying that the man that the woman can get divorced, well, then why can't the man do the divorcing if he becomes a cherish? So amrulay. So that's why they explained. They explained it on both sides. So with respect to the man, we disagree with you because the man needs mental capacity in order to provide the divorce. And we effectively also disagree with you with respect to the woman, that the woman doesn't need, and so as a result, she's just like the minor who was married off by her father, who can still get divorced, even though she is a minor, similarly to a woman who was an adult and was pikeach originally, and then becomes a chereshes, then she becomes a chereshes, and now she lacks legal capacity. It doesn't matter. Just like the marriage to a minor can be then that was created biblically because the father was involved, so and can be undermined even though there's no capacity by the wife. because she's a minor. Similarly, when the woman creates the original biblical marriage because she's a fully capable adult woman, and then she becomes a chereshes, so too she can also be divorced, just like the case of the minor. And so that's why we need to tell you both sides. We're saying we disagree with you with respect to the woman, and we can explain why we are not consistent between the woman and the man. Finally, we'll just note, hey, Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda testified as follows, right? So he testified that a biblically married deaf mute can be divorced. So Amarava may do so. Shall Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda. So from that testimony, what can we learn? Amar le'edim. If a man says to witnesses, Ru'u get zesha ani notain. See this get that I'm about to give. V'amar la, I want you to witness this get that I'm about to give to this woman. V'amar la. And then what does he tell the woman? Kinsi shtar chozeh. Please accept this promissory note. Meaning, I'm lying to you. He doesn't tell her the truth, but he tries to get her to accept the get because by saying what it is, saying a lie about what it is in the document. Harezo migoreshes. That person is considered divorced. And how do we learn that from Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda's statement? So because Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda shows that you don't need any mental capacity on the woman's part. She doesn't have to even know that she's accepting a divorce. Now, again, today with Rabbi it's different. Rabbi Takana de Rabbeinu Gershom says that is required. So Milo Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda lo be'inan daita. Again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda says we don't need the woman's consent. So Hachanami lo be'inan daita, we don't need her consent. So Pshita, the Gemara asks, I don't understand why, Rabba, did you need to even tell us this? Isn't this totally obvious? Well, no, it's not totally obvious because maybe I might have thought that because he calls the document a promissory note, because he says I'm obligating myself to you to pay you money as a result of this document, that he is effectively undermining the nature of the get. So Kamash Malan, so Rava is teaching us that that if in fact he had really wanted to undermine the get, he would have told the witnesses that he was changing the nature of the document. And so Midelo Amar La'edim, since he didn't tell the witnesses that he was changing the nature of the document, Lo Batle Velo Midi. He was not trying to cancel the get at all. And that which he was telling her, the fact that it was a shtar chov, it was only machmas kisufa hu dekamar la. It was because he didn't want to embarrass more, I think, himself than her, but he didn't want to create a potentially embarrassing situation of telling her that he was divorcing her. So we'll pick up from here, God willing, tomorrow, and they'll look forward again. Same bad time, same bad channel. We'll meet back here, God willing, at 7:45 tomorrow. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you again, as always. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.